It's a lot. Yeah. I thought this might be true until I learned he's hooked up with Dick Cheney and Richard Pearl, known as the Prince of Darkness, by the way, at the Pentagon.
We're on the march.
Thank you for...
All right, I'm done talking about the Ventura mystery until we hear from Jesse. But we've covered it in detail today. Probably spent 30 minutes total in the last hour and a half on it or more, because it just gets into psyops. And it gets into the type of things they'll do. I mean, take Jesse Ventura. They knew he was major political material back when he was more mainstream, before he fully woke up, in 2000. So they come to him in 2001, 2002. They come to him in 2002. They give him a big contract, close to $10 million, $9 million plus, for a 3-year contract to host a primetime show on MSNBC, back when they actually had viewers. And then the war starts, and he says, no, I'm not going to be pro-war. And they say, okay, you can keep the money, but you're barred from even giving it back. We'll sue you if you even try to give it back. And he said, no, I keep contracts. And they say, no media interviews of any type. Look at your contract. And so for 3 years, until 2006, he's gone. They paid him close to $10 million. And later he was told by folks, oh, you were approached. MSNBC gets government money, which we now know from banker bailouts and things that have come out. But back then, this was wild to hear. And the government actually wanted you tied down, and you would have had the job and been this big TV guy if you would have played ball. But if not, they were just going to shut you down. And they had you profiled. And so that was the plan all along. So they paid him $9+ million. He's now talked about this since. Actually broke it a few years ago here on my show. And that all of this went on. So now they're getting ready to launch an Iran war. They know Jesse Ventura's floating around thinking about coming back. If there was an attack on Iran, he was thinking about getting involved in the political process, at least giving speeches or whatever. That at least was being looked at, I can tell you. He was thinking about running for president. There was some other talk I'm not going to get into. But the point is that he's got major name recognition, and that's what's valuable in politics. So he is this commodity. And so this smells completely of PSYOP, the way it was deployed, the way it was put out, the way it was done, the way it was said, just the whole thing. I mean, it's like when you walk into a clothing shop. I'm not even, a clothes horse and know that much about it, but I've learned enough to know the cut of a fine suit or an Armani. Don't have an Armani suit, but I've learned what they look like from movies and TV, and I've been in stores. I've seen them. I'm like, are those Armanis? Yeah. Those are Armanis. About 2 years ago, I was at Nordstrom's buying some shoes. Says, are those Armani suits? Yeah, how'd you know? Well, I see that cut. With this, it's a lot more obvious, like a yellow Volkswagen drives by or a red fire truck. That's a red fire truck. I mean, you know a PR rollout when you see one. And a book comes out, all this is done, and it just shows you that as soon as I investigated the guy, and he may be dumb and being handled, being manipulated, and part of it's true, and they got him to spin it, but part of psyoping and moving to the next level out of the military is doing bad things. And I don't know if that's the case yet. The guy conceivably could be telling the truth. Tyrell says he doesn't think so, and I tend to agree with him. It just shows you what they're capable of. So if they ever do stuff like this to me, I'm walking down the street and they jump out with a, quadriplegic kid in a wheelchair and say I assault him, like they did our reporters up in New York, and it turned out it was staged with, again, News Corps and the New York Post. And it came out in court. It was staged. The Secret Service wouldn't lie. They could do any of this to us, folks, so we just need to remember. You asked Ron Paul. That was the point I wanted to make before we go to Charlotte. Think of what they're trying with Ron Paul. One of my reporters just ran in. I've got to learn more later, but reportedly they're putting ads out now claiming they're Ron Paul ads, but they aren't his Ron Paul ads, saying bad things about Asians and blacks and people. So I've got to learn about this dirty trick. I mean, it's going to get crazy. By the way, we told you about this 2 days ago. It's now in the news. In fact, I had it here in my stack. They're admitting on NPR, and they're admitting on other mainline newspapers that Romney was given votes that were not his. And it's the same thing with Huntsman. I've got a whole stack on that. I mean, there's a certain point where you can't even keep track of this anymore. They're supposed to call in at all these precincts, and now it turns out in a whole bunch of them, it's been confirmed. We don't know how many, though, but it's been confirmed in a bunch of them. We know the precincts that they told them, just put it in a truck and drive it to this other location to have them counted. And then we'll call that in. And then trucks didn't make it. And then they had gentlemen's agreements. We played that clip from Fox News with Karl Rove deciding to give, 6 more points to Huntsman, clearly making him beat Ron Paul. I mean, it's just confirmed. But it's too sophisticated for the general public. Yeah, that was Santorum. At a certain point, I can't even keep track of it anymore. This is what these people do. They just swarm me with disinfo. And they know the public's halfway paying attention. People on the street go, I've seen you on TV with Hulk Hogan on that conspiracy show. And I go, it's Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory. That's Jesse Ventura. That was back when one of my neighbors was a bank manager, pretty smart guy. And I'm like, no. And he was arguing with me. He goes, no, you got a show with Hulk Hogan. I'm like, no, man, I don't have a show with Hulk Hogan. And it's the same thing. I know I'm going to hear people down the road, oh, that's that Hulk Hogan guy got punched out by a Navy SEAL. It just never ends how they count on people not paying attention and how they manipulate you. Now, I'm very excited to have Charlotte Iserbyt on with us till about 40 after next hour, so we'll have her for more than an hour here with us today. We put out a documentary that's free to the public. We've got it linked up today at Infowars.com. Charlotte Iserbyt blows Skull and Bones wide open. She originally did it decades ago, but didn't want the credit, giving investigative reporter, formerly top congressional researcher, Anthony Sutton, the material to put out his books on the Skull and Bones, which were the definitive tomes. But I've got her on today to Nexus. I probably should have told her this ahead of time, but just to recap before she gets more into education, the history of Skull and Bones setting up modern education in Europe, in Germany, here in the U.S., and those connections. And, of course, she knows about Skull and Bones because her father and grandfather were, and she has a lot of the internal documents and has one of their official grandfather clocks and a lot of information she showed us that was put out for the first time. A lot of it was not put out for the first time, but was integrated together for the first time as well. So as a public service, we, of course, to understand the secret establishment, understand what we're up against, put that out to the public. Prisonplanet.tv viewers, of course, saw it first. Her original Dallas phone book size book is no longer in print, but is free on her website, graciously, because she wants to stop these tyrants. But I convinced her, I don't know, 6, 7 months ago, I said, and others did, I said, why don't you come out? I know you said you weren't going to print it again. You don't want to mess with it. You're retired and want to travel the world and things. You've done your service. But why don't you just reprint it again? People want it. And she said, no, it's free on the website. And then I said, well, you've got all these new articles you've written. Why don't you put those together in a book? She said, you know what I'll do? I'll just kind of update, revise, and abridge my big phone book size one and put out the Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, Revised, Abridged Edition, Charlotte Thompson Iserbyt. And so this is now available at Infowars.com. We've got a treasure trove of them, and I hope that you order them because once these run out, we don't know if she'll ever even reprint them because, again, the question is, does she want to deal with that? She may just put it out for free again. But if you want a hard copy of this new version of Deliberate Dumbing Down, full of all the documents and all the incredible proof of the plan to dumb down our children and turn us into basically servile animals that are incapable of thought, as Bertrand Russell said, they'll dumb us down with diet, injections, and injunctions and education to the point of it'll be like sheep revolting against the process of and the fashion of eating. It would be like sheep revolting against the practice of eating mutton. Again, if I sound a bit out of it today, sometimes can't recall things quite as well. I cracked some ribs and separated some ribs, dropping a weight on myself in a weightlifting accident last weekend, so I'm a little bit out of it. Not on painkillers. Painkillers make me nauseous. I am on about 10 Advil today so far, but I'm just a little bit out of it, so bear with me today. Okay, so joining us is Charlotte Iserbyt to break down this information. Charlotte, it is wonderful to have you here. I want to go to the beginning, briefly, Skull and Bones, the tie-in, and then what the plan was, what you discovered in the 80s as the head of policy, #2 position, Department of Education, your whistleblowing, and now what's currently happening with education, your warning for the public. But we salute you for your work, and thank you for reissuing a new book. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you, all of your audience, for your support, through the years. I think the best place for people to go is, and you have that PDF, I believe, up on your website now. At least
yes.
I asked for that. It's a PDF, and it's called America's Road to Ruin. And there were two marvelous gals, researchers that I respect highly, very involved in the extraordinary research all of us have done on this, who heard that first video that was filmed on the river here, saw it, Alex's video, that those guys did a good job on, and it was in regard to education. But it really dealt with everything, right? I didn't deal so much with the order, and I will deal with that within about 2 minutes. But it dealt with my whole life since I went abroad when I was 21 years old. And it's beautifully done. It's a transcript. The gals transcribed that video, Alex. And then one of our most talented people, Deborah Niwa, who's in publishing and graphics and all, put it all together, even has a picture of my little dog on it, and my husband and me, as a PDF. So your listeners can click on that, and they can read that. It's 16 pages. That's the video that your great guys did when they were up here, the first one. Then the second one was on the order, and I don't know what, that has not been transcribed, but I hope people will go and look at it because it has had a maximum number of hits. These have been very good videos, and by the way, I just think your guys are great. You have a tremendously capable staff there with creating these videos. But let's, I found out something about the order. It's great. Actually, I found out more about the order since you got onto it, and actually since Anthony Sutton got onto it, than I ever knew before, because obviously, as George Bush would say, it's a secret, so I can't talk about it. I mean, I don't know anything about it, basically, because it was a secret, and my father and grandfather couldn't talk about it, but I did know all their friends, and that really helped out a great deal. There's a tremendous amount. There's a very interesting chapter in Chris Milligan's book on the order. What's it called? Fleshing Out Skull and Bones. That book has not been reprinted, but it's a wonderful book, Fleshing Out Skull and Bones. And Chris Milligan knew Anthony Sutton, too. I did a chapter in there that's quite interesting. If anybody wants to go, I think it's you may be able to find that on the Internet, about my family's connections as well. Now, after the last interview that we did on this, I thought, I was looking through some of my old files, and I found a very interesting article from one of the little old patriotic newsletters that we managed to get around the country in regard to Harold Howe and how he was responsible under Lyndon Johnson for all the major changes in education using, of course, the minorities to bring about the destruction of our education system that we're looking at today with consolidation, getting rid of little schools and all this. Remember, way back in the 60s, they said it was because they wanted the minorities to have a better education. That wasn't it at all. Harold Howe came out and said with this integration, he was going to totally turn the education system on its head. And so they put in busing, and they did all this, that. And here my little head is going, I'm thinking, Harold Howe, you know what? I'm going to go take a look in one of those.
Well, Charlotte, listen, I want you to get into this.